Time for another board game review, and this time we have the game One Night Ultimate Werewolf. This was sent to me by Bezier Games and is designed by Ted Elspach and Akihisa Okui. In One Night Ultimate Werewolf, each player takes on the role of a villager, a werewolf, or a special character. It's your job to figure out who the werewolves are and to kill at least one of them in order to win. Unless you've become a werewolf yourself. Ooh. Let me show you how to play. So in One Night Ultimate Werewolf, each player takes on the role of a villager, a werewolf, or some kind of special character like the robber here. And they all have a secret role, and it's your job to figure out who the werewolves are and to try to kill one of them in order to win, unless you're a werewolf, in which case you don't want a werewolf to die. So the game takes place over a 10-minute night, and during that night, a lot of different special actions happen, and you're going to try to figure out what team you're on, because your role card might have been switched with another role card, and then figure out what teams the other players are on. At the end of the round, you'll vote for a player who isn't on your team, and whoever receives the most votes is killed. So if a werewolf is killed, all the villagers win, and everyone who's on the villagers' team. If no werewolves are killed, then the werewolves win. Setup depends on how many players you have. No matter what, you always have to have 3 extra cards than the number of players you have. So with a 5-player game, you would need to have 8 cards total. There's all sorts of different roles. I'm going to go through them later, but you can customize your game however you'd like for that round. For your first game with 5 players, they recommend 3 villagers, 2 werewolves, a troublemaker, a seer, and a robber. So we'll go with that. We'll shuffle this deck, and then you would deal a card to each player, and then you put the remaining 3 cards in the middle. Once all the cards are dealt, each player should secretly view their card. So this player is the troublemaker, and place it face down near the 3 cards in the center of the table. All players should be able to reach all cards easily. You can also set out these very useful tokens. These will tell you or remind you which roles are currently in the game. And also what order the roles go during the course of the night. Now the game features a free app that runs the game for you with an announcer. It's very, very handy and like really the only way to play it. This way everyone can play without somebody having to step out and be the announcer. And the announcer will read every single step of the way. But I'm going to go through the sort of night phase as if I were the announcer. So first off, any players that are werewolves would open their eyes. In this case, this player is a werewolf. He is actually the only werewolf. We'll go ahead and just flip these to make them public so you can kind of see. But these will obviously all be face down during the game. I see. Actually, there's only 1 werewolf in this round. So he would open his eyes, see that no one else has opened their eyes, and realize that he is alone. That means the other werewolf card is in the middle here. Then the werewolf closes his eyes, and then the next player that goes is the seer. As you can see, it's number 5 in order. The seer gets to wake up, open their eyes, and look at someone else's card or 2 of the center cards. So let's say the seer goes, I'm going to look at this player's card. They get to look secretly, see that they're the troublemaker, and put the card back face down. Next in line is the robber. The robber gets to wake up after the seers close their eyes, and they can exchange their card with another player's card and view their new card. So let's say the robber decides, I'm going to exchange my card with this card. Little do they know that that card is actually the werewolf. So now, this player that was the robber is now the werewolf, and the werewolf player does not realize that they are now the robber. Then after the robber does their turn, they close their eyes and the troublemaker gets to wake up. And what the troublemaker does is they can exchange cards between 2 other players. So let's say the troublemaker exchanges these 2. So voila. Now, this player is the robber, and this player is the villager. After the troublemaker closes their eyes, everybody wakes up because the villager and this player doesn't do anything. They just keep their eyes closed the entire time. It's honestly the most boring role. Now, once the night phase is done, everyone opens their eyes and they begin to discuss who they believe the werewolves are. You can say anything you want, but you can never show your card to anyone. And werewolves might want to claim to be a different role so that they don't die. Because certain roles change other players' cards, some players will believe they are one role. For example, this player believes he's a werewolf, but little does he know he's actually now a villager. After the night phase, your role is the card that is currently the one in front of you, and it may be different than your original role. You cannot look at your cards after the night phase. After the app's timer runs out, players will have to vote, and everyone says, everyone, 3, 2, 1, vote. And they all vote at another player. Whoever has the most votes dies and reveals their card. So let's say in this round, I don't know how it went, but let's say people suspected this player of being the werewolf, and they all voted for him. He would reveal his card. Oh, he's not the werewolf. Who's the werewolf? Ah, now this player steals the win. So, after just one night and one day, if one werewolf dies, then all the human players win. And if no werewolf dies, then the werewolf characters win. There is a special role called the Tanner that has special rules for winning. I'll explain that in a second. But yeah, this is basically a social deduction game where you're trying to figure out what happened. So maybe the seer might be like, hey, I saw that this card is the troublemaker, so I might reveal that early, or I might say it later. Either way, it's interesting to see how it unfolds. And the troublemaker knows that they switched these two cards, but the robber knows that they switched cards with this player. So depending on how it unfolds, like certain revelations might come out, like certain accusations might fly. It's a very, very interesting game. First off, you got the hunter. If the hunter is chosen to die, whoever he's pointing at also dies, regardless of how many votes his target receives. And this guy is on the villager team. So he might be like, hey guys, if you really suspect me, vote for me and I'll point at somebody else and kill them too. Assuming he's telling the truth. But that's what the hunter can do. They can point at someone else if they die and kill them as well. The Tanner hates his job so much that he wants to die, so he only wins if he dies. If he dies and no werewolves die, the werewolves do not win. If the Tanner dies and a werewolf also dies, the village team wins too. This Tanner is considered a member of the village but is not on their team. So if the Tanner dies when all werewolves are in the center, the village team loses. So this guy's a free agent. He just wants to die. So if he can successfully trick everyone into thinking that he is a werewolf and get himself voted, he will be the only winner pretty much. The drunk is so drunk he doesn't remember his role. When it comes time to wake up at night, he must exchange his card. So let's say he's this player. He has to exchange his card for any card in the center. But he does not look at it. This is now his new role, so even he doesn't know what his role is. In this case, now he's a villager, and he is on that team. The Insomniac wakes up and looks at her card to see if it has changed. Only use this Insomniac if the robber and or the troublemaker are in the game, and they are on the village team. So they wake up, they get to check their card and see if they're still the Insomniac. If they're not, then they'll know their role. By the way, I forgot to mention the Tanner and Hunter do not wake up during the nighttime phase. The Minion immediately follows the werewolf phase, and they wake up and see who the werewolves are. During this phase, all werewolves put their thumbs up so the Minion can see who they are. The werewolves don't know who the Minion is. If the Minion dies and no werewolves die, the werewolves and the Minion win. If no players are werewolves, the Minion wins as long as one other player who's not the Minion dies. This is a very powerful ally for the werewolf team. The Masons, when using the Masons, always put both cards in the game. The Mason wakes up at night and looks for the other Mason. If the Mason doesn't see another Mason, it means the other Mason card is in the center. Masons are on the village team. So yeah, they just wake up, look for the other Mason, and confirm each other. Otherwise, that means one of them is in the center. And finally, the most complicated card, this is the Doppelganger. She takes on the role and team of whatever card she views. So what she does is she wakes up before all the other roles, and she looks at someone else's card, doesn't switch them, just looks, and does the following based on what she sees. If she sees a villager, Tanner, or hunter, she becomes that role and does nothing else. If she wakes up and sees a werewolf or mason, she is on the werewolf team if she views a werewolf, and is on the village team if she views a mason. So she wakes up with them at their same time. If she sees the seer, robber, troublemaker, or drunk, she immediately does that role's action. So she doesn't do it when the original role does it. She just does it right then and there. If she sees a minion card, at the end of the Doppelganger phase, the announcer will tell the Doppelganger to close their eyes unless they are now the minion. And then they can see that the werewolves put their thumbs up. And she is on the werewolf team. If she sees the Insomniac card, after the Insomniac closes her eyes, the Doppelganger Insomniac wakes up to check her card to see if she is still the Doppelganger. So this is easily the most complicated card. You don't want to use this one at first, but it can really make things interesting because it can have you could potentially have two of one role, and that makes things really tricky. And here's the order of when these actions take place. The Doppelganger would always go first, then the werewolves would open their eyes. Then the minion can see the werewolf's thumbs extended, but the werewolf's eyes are closed. Then the masons will wake up and look for each other. Then the seer will look at someone's card. Then the robber will steal a card. Then the troublemaker will switch cards. Then the drunk will switch a card from the middle. And then the insomniac will check to see if their role has changed. Meanwhile, the tanner, the hunter, and the villagers don't do anything that night. This would only be if you played with, wow, that'd be an insane game. That'd be like 13 players. I don't think I'd recommend that, but you technically could. I think it only plays up to 10 actually. I think 13 would just be insane. Anyway, that's the order of when these actions take place, and the app does a very good job of running the game for you and telling you exactly what you need to do. And that's that. You have your role, you do your actions during the night, and then you wake up and try to figure out who's who and try to either trick others if you're the werewolf, or if you're a villager, try to figure out what happened. That's the game. So this game is incredibly fun. It takes the concept of werewolf/mafia and just pares it down to one night, and it works so well. There's no player elimination and having to just sit around and watch the rest of the game being played. And because it's short, you can play multiple rounds, and you will because it's so much fun. What makes this game so meaty as a hit and roll game is the sheer variety of roles that you can have, and they're all very interesting. I thought roles like the robber or the troublemaker seemed random, but really what they do is add a fantastic dimension of the game where when you wake up, you don't know for sure if the role you have is the one you started with. Giving information too early or too late can ruin you in this game, and lying is pretty much an amazing tool. The free app that the game offers is essential. You can download it very easily. It allows everyone to play without having to worry about an announcer for the game, and it very clearly lays out the order and jobs of each role, because sometimes with certain roles like the Doppelganger, it's kind of a complicated, trying to remember what goes where. So if you have an announcer just reading the directions for you, it's great. It's the best way to play. I love a good app that works well with the game, and this one sets up your game. You can just input what characters you're playing, you can add expansions, you can do whatever you need to, and it executes it very smoothly. It also lets you have a time limit for discussion, which is great because it adds a level of tension that really works. Like when time's running out, it's like, all right, you just gotta point at somebody, let's go. Once you've got the initial roles down, I suggest taking out the villagers as soon as possible and putting in more roles. Because the villager, that's a basic bitch role, let's be honest. You don't do anything, come on. Each different role and combination of roles can make each game such a different and interesting experience. There's so much potential for lying and so much to piece together and figure out what happened during the night. It's great. One minor issue is that during the nighttime phase, if everyone is too quiet, it can be difficult for people to reach for cards or manipulate them as they need to without arousing attention. So we had kind of like a house remedy where everyone would just kind of like tap their fingers or, you know, shift around, make noises, instead of sitting completely silently. If you sit completely silently, it is very hard to try to move without alerting the attention of your fellow players. You can use a mat, which we do have a mat, and I know the game also, I think Bezier sells a mat that works with this game, but honestly, if you just do that and just kind of shift around and make noise, then that kind of disguises it so that everyone can do their actions without worrying about it. Anyways, it's a brilliant game. There's so many layers of strategy and different ways you can mess with your opponents. I highly recommend it. It's a fantastic party game. It's just one I can bring out and go, hey, let's play like a round or 2 or 5, and everyone's gonna have a good time. I love this game. Fantastic.